Robinson was just 25 when she died in Cabo San Lucas in October 2022.
It was supposed to be a friend's getaway to Cabo San Lucas in October 2022, but 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson never made it home.
Her friends, now known as the Cabo Six, told her family it was alcohol poisoning, but a Mexican autopsy pointed to spinal and neck trauma.
She went to Mexico for a vacation, but within 24 hours, Shanquella Robinson was dead. Her friends said it was an accident, but the video told a different story. 2 autopsies, contradictory reports, a warrant ignored. How does a murder be filmed and no one be held accountable? This is Shanquella's story and the tragic unfolding of events that occurred on October 29, 2022, the day she was brutally murdered in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. The woman whose life was taken that day was widely recognized as a respectable, independent businesswoman, hairstylist, and social media personality. She was most popular on Instagram, handle it's .quella__, boasting nearly thousands of followers at the time of her death. At only 25 years old, she had already achieved great success, founding a women's fashion clothing line and operating a children's hair braiding business called Exquisite Kids and Exquisite Boutique. Her TikTok memorialized showcases her talent. Before the headlines and heartbreak, Shanquella possessed a presence that radiated warmth, style, and quiet strength. With her luminous brown eyes and radiant smile, she carried herself with a grace that felt both effortless and intentional. Her Instagram feed, curated with care and confidence, was more than a showcase of fashion and beauty. It was a reflection of a life lived boldly and unapologetically. She stood at 5'4", her frame petite but commanding, often adorned in vibrant colors and sleek silhouettes that spoke to her love for self-expression and her eye for detail. Friends and clients described her as gentle, magnetic, and the kind of person who made you feel seen. She had a softness in her voice, a kindness in her gestures, and a spark that made people lean in. Her businesses weren't just entrepreneurial ventures, they were extensions of her nurturing spirit and creative soul. She didn't just style hair or sell clothes. She uplifted, empowered, and made people feel beautiful from the inside out. Online, her followers admired her not just for her looks, but for her authenticity. She modeled her own designs, posed with poise, and shared glimpses of her life that felt intimate, yet aspirational. Her captions were often lighthearted, her smile ever-present, and her energy contagious. She was the kind of woman who made you believe in possibility and reminded you that elegance and ambition could coexist. In every photo, every post, and every interaction, Shanquella left behind a digital fingerprint of joy, resilience, and grace. In the silence that followed her death, those images became echoes of a life that deserved so much more time. Her mother, Salamandra Robinson, was more than just a parent. She was Shanquella's confidant, her daily check-in, and her emotional anchor. Their relationship was marked by frequent conversations, shared laughter, and a rhythm of connection that made even the smallest exchanges feel meaningful. On the night before Shanquella left for Mexico, she called her mother with excitement in her voice, describing how a private chef was preparing dinner for the group. That call ended with a simple but powerful, "I love you," a phrase that had become second nature between them, a ritual of affection that underscored the depth of their bond. Her father, Bernard Robinson, was a quiet but steady presence in her life, a man who took pride in his daughter's independence and entrepreneurial spirit. He supported her ventures with admiration, watching as she built her boutique and hair braiding businesses from the ground up. His love was expressed in gestures, showing up, standing by, and celebrating her milestones with quiet joy. He saw her not just as his daughter, but as a reflection of everything he hoped the world would be: kind, ambitious, and full of promise. Shanquella's relationship with her older sister, Tequila Long, was grounded in familiarity and trust. They shared the kind of bond that didn't need constant affirmation. It lived in the everyday moments. Just before her trip, Shanquella stopped by Tequila's place to borrow a suitcase, a casual exchange that spoke volumes about their closeness. Tequila had no reason to worry. She believed her sister was traveling with people she trusted, including someone she considered a best friend. Their connection was built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone always had your back. Nothing in her parents' hearts could have braced them for the horror that unfolded on October 29, 2022, a day that began with laughter and ended in betrayal. She had traveled to Cabo San Lucas with 6 people she called friends, people she trusted enough to share a villa, a meal, and a moment of celebration. But within hours, those same companions would become central figures in a tragedy that defied explanation. They claimed she had too much to drink. They called her mother with rehearsed concern. They returned home with silence stitched into their stories. What they didn't say, and what they tried to hide, would soon unravel into a chilling investigation marked by conflicting autopsies, viral footage, and a family forced to become detectives in their own daughter's death.
Investigators say her 6 travel mates, now dubbed as the Cabo Six, initially told Robinson's family she may have died from alcohol poisoning. But according to documents WCNC Charlotte obtained, an autopsy in Mexico revealed a different story.
What follows is not just a recounting of events, but a descent into the shadows of deception, silence, and the haunting question, what really happened in that room? The first signs of trouble weren't loud. They crept in with eerie quiet. The group had arrived the day before, checked into the luxury villa, and posted smiling clips to Instagram. There were no obvious tensions and no visible conflict, at least not yet. Then, everything shifted. On the morning of October 29th, inside one of the bedrooms, someone propped up a phone and pressed record. The footage captured a chilling scene. Shanquella Robinson, naked and disoriented, standing at the center of the room, surrounded. A woman, Dejanay Jackson, confronted her. The confrontation escalated swiftly into physical violence. Punches flew, grabs turned into throws. Shanquella was tossed to the floor with force. She did not fight back. A man filming from nearby offered no help. Instead, he mocked, "Quella, can you at least fight back?" She didn't. She remained defenseless. The recording ended, but the violence did not. Later that day, around 2:13 p.m., someone at the villa called for medical assistance. A local doctor arrived and found Shanquella unresponsive, yet still alive. The doctor attempted to revive her, remaining on site for nearly 3 hours. Her friends claimed she was dehydrated and had overindulged on alcohol. They refused hospital transport. They said they'd give her a shower. They tried to keep her warm. But by 5:57 p.m., she stopped breathing. Paramedics were summoned. CPR was administered. She was declared dead, barely 24 hours after arriving in paradise. By nightfall, the villa was thick with unease. Authorities were called. The friends offered scattered accounts. Shanquella's lifeless body remained inside the room where the celebration had collapsed into violence. Her belongings untouched, her companions pacing between shock, silence, and the edge of escape. The investigation that followed was a labyrinth of contradictions, elusive truths, and unanswered questions. As authorities scrambled to piece together the puzzle, the world watched in disbelief, demanding justice for a life cut tragically short. The first autopsy, conducted by Mexican authorities, was initially aimed at confirming suspicions of alcohol poisoning. But as the medical examiner carefully examined Shanquella's body, the findings told a far darker story. Instead of just alcohol-related causes, the report revealed severe spinal cord injuries, including an atlas luxation, a dislocation of the top vertebra in the neck that directly contradicted the claim of accidental death. The official report, originally written in Spanish, required careful translation before the gravity of these injuries could be fully understood. What was meant to close the case instead cracked it wide open, exposing a brutal reality hidden beneath the surface. When Bernard, Shanquella's father, finally saw his daughter's body, the wounds that had been obscured on paper became painfully real. Her lip was split, one eye swollen shut, and a large knot marred her forehead. Injuries no amount of alcohol could explain. Through the fog of grief and shock, Bernard made a solemn vow. "Baby, Daddy will get you justice." From that moment, the story shifted from mourning a life lost to waging a relentless battle for the truth. It would challenge borders, authorities, and the silence surrounding her final hours. As the family grappled with the devastating reality, questions began to pile up, each one heavier than the last. How had the injuries happened? Who was responsible? And why had those closest to Shanquella painted a picture so starkly different from the evidence? The silence from her companions only deepened the wounds left behind. Doubting the initial findings and desperate for answers, U.S. officials arranged for a second autopsy to be performed. The second autopsy, conducted in the United States, shockingly contradicted the initial findings from Mexico. It revealed no evidence of spinal fractures or other traumatic injuries. Instead, the report identified a hypoxic ischemic brain injury, which can result from a lack of oxygen to the brain, and noted slight lateral curvature in the upper to mid-thoracic spine. Crucially, the cause of death was deemed undetermined, leaving more questions than answers. This discrepancy between the two autopsies intensified the mystery surrounding Shanquella Robinson's death and fueled ongoing debates about what truly occurred in that villa. The conflicting autopsy reports deepened the anguish and confusion surrounding Shanquella's death. One painted a picture of violent trauma, the other left the cause undetermined, denying closure to a grieving family desperate for answers. With each new detail, the walls of silence around the case grew thicker, and the search for truth became a battle against not only mystery, but also doubt and disbelief. The questions remained. How could two reports tell such different stories, and what was the reality hidden somewhere in between?
Police reports stating the Charlotte native went into cardiac arrest, declared dead by 6 p.m. But an autopsy differing from that report, stating medical officials arrived before 3 p.m., quickly declaring Robinson dead from severe spinal cord injury and a dislocated neck.
As the family struggled to make sense of the contradictory findings, the spotlight turned toward those who had been with Shanquella in her final hours. Their silence and shifting stories only fueled suspicion and raised painful questions about what they might be hiding. Every unanswered question became a barrier between justice and the truth, forcing the family to confront a harsh reality. Business started and designed to provide fresh. The fight would not end with medical reports or official statements. It would demand relentless pursuit, unyielding courage, and the hope that the truth, no matter how dark, would finally come to light. Public pressure mounted as the video of the assault spread across social media, igniting outrage and heartbreak around the world. Strangers became advocates. Hashtags turned into movements. Protesters gathered, not just in Charlotte, but across the country, demanding accountability. Shanquella's name was spoken in newsrooms, in rallies, in halls of power. But as the days turned to weeks and weeks into months, no arrests were made. The same friends who stood in that villa, who watched and filmed as violence unfolded, walked free, uncharged, unnamed, untouched. And with every moment of silence from authorities, the wound only deepened. Behind closed doors, federal investigators began to examine the case, launching an inquiry into whether a U.S. citizen had committed a crime abroad. The FBI opened an investigation out of Charlotte, but the process moved slowly, burdened by international law, jurisdictional hurdles, and the glaring inconsistencies between the Mexican and U.S. autopsy reports. Meanwhile, Mexican authorities issued an arrest warrant for one of the women seen in the video, identifying her as the alleged aggressor. However, extradition required cooperation from the United States, and months passed with no handover, no indictment, and no justice. The gap between what the world had witnessed and what the system delivered grew wider with each passing day.
Losing a loved one in the heinous way in which has happened to Shanquella, there probably will never be peace for them.
In April 2023, the U.S. Department of Justice delivered a devastating blow to the Robinson family. After months of investigation, federal prosecutors announced they would not be filing charges, citing insufficient evidence to pursue a federal case.
Released their statement indicating that they don't plan on filing any charges after investigating Shanquella's case. So we're here today. We're disappointed, but we're not deterred.
The decision landed like a thunderclap. It didn't matter that there was a video. It didn't matter that her injuries sparked global outrage. To the system, it wasn't enough. No one would be held accountable. No trial, no names, no justice, just silence, again. And for a family who had buried their daughter and carried her through borders and headlines, it felt like betrayal dressed in procedure. Still, the Robinsons refused to let Shanquella's story fade into silence. They turned their grief into action, appearing at rallies, speaking at press conferences, and demanding intervention from the highest levels of government. Civil rights attorneys joined the fight, urging the Biden administration to step in where the justice system had stalled. Petitions circulated. Congressional leaders began to ask questions. The movement grew louder, more determined. Shanquella's name became more than a tragedy. It became a rallying cry for justice denied, a symbol of how easily a Black woman's death can be buried beneath bureaucracy, even when the world is watching. Yet even as the calls for justice echoed from city streets to Capitol Hill, no meaningful legal action followed. The arrest warrant issued by Mexico remained untouched, sitting idle in the absence of U.S. cooperation. The woman identified as the aggressor in the video continued living freely on American soil, never questioned publicly, never charged at home or abroad. For Shanquella's family, each passing day without accountability felt like watching her be erased in slow motion. The system hadn't just failed to protect her, it seemed determined to forget her. And still, the Robinsons pressed forward, unwilling to let the truth die where the law had gone silent. In the absence of legal justice, the weight of truth fell into the hands of the people. Journalists, activists, and everyday citizens kept Shanquella's story alive, sharing her name, her face, and the brutal facts of her final hours. Podcasts dissected the timeline. Independent investigators pored over documents, piecing together the fragments that officials had left behind. Each retelling became a form of resistance, a refusal to let her story be buried beneath red tape and inaction. Though the courts had fallen silent, the court of public conscience remained wide awake, and it would not forget what had been seen or what had been done. And beneath the headlines and hashtags, one truth pulsed louder than the rest. Shanquella Robinson did not die from alcohol poisoning. She was not simply another tourist who partied too hard in paradise. She was a daughter, a friend, a business owner, a young Black woman whose life was stolen in a moment of cruelty, while people she trusted stood by and watched. The world had seen the footage, heard the lies, read the reports, and yet the system asked for more. More evidence, more clarity, more justification to care. But for those who loved her, and for millions who saw themselves in her story, the injustice was already crystal clear. Now, what remains is a haunting stillness, a justice system that looked the other way, a case frozen in unanswered questions, and a family left to carry a burden they never asked for. Shanquella's grave is marked with flowers and prayers, but no peace. Her mother wakes each day with the weight of absence. Her father still speaks her name with fire in his voice. And across the country, people still ask the question that echoes louder with time. How can a murder be filmed, witnessed, documented, and still be ignored? The silence left in the wake of her death is deafening, but so is the promise that her story will not disappear. In the end, Shanquella Robinson's story is a reckoning. It is a stark reminder of what happens when justice falters and voices go unheard, and a call to action for every one of us to demand more, to push harder, and to refuse the comfort of silence. Her life, her pain, and her truth are now part of a larger fight for accountability, transparency, and the kind of justice that sees every life as priceless. Shanquella may be gone, but her legacy is far from over. It lives on in every plea for truth, every step toward change, and every heartbeat that refuses to forget. Her story is a stark, unyielding call to demand accountability, to challenge injustice, and to remember that behind every headline is a life lost, a family shattered, and a truth begging to be heard. Shanquella Robinson's name now carries the weight of all those who have been silenced, a haunting reminder that justice must be fought for, relentlessly, fiercely, without pause. And as long as her story is told, as long as her name is spoken, there remains hope that one day justice will no longer be just a word, but a reality.